Welcome to Pod Trendcast with Stella and Mark, where the world's trends take center stage.
Okay, let's try and unpack this. Have you ever reflected on how we truly understand the ethical foundations of historical societies? Particularly when it comes down to how they treated the most vulnerable people, like children.
Absolutely. It's a critical lens.
So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into some, frankly, quite challenging historical sources that really invite us to confront exactly that question.
Indeed. And our objective for this deep dive is essentially to explore how certain historical Islamic texts depict the treatment of children and vulnerable women.
Okay.
Specifically, we're looking at a YouTube analysis that uses Sahih al-Bukhari, some Maliki fiqh, and also a Byzantine account from the period.
Right.
We'll be looking into specific incidents, legal interpretations that are presented in these materials. The aim really is just to understand the arguments and ideas within them. We're not, endorsing or refuting any specific viewpoint here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's crucial. We're going to navigate what is definitely sensitive, sometimes difficult historical ground. Our job, really, is to pull out the key insights from the sources you've brought, see what light they shed on these complex historical practices, and sort of guide you, the listener, through this material. So here's where the implications really start to become, well, quite clear. Our first source, this analysis referencing Sahih al-Bukhari number 4350, it takes us back to the raid of Khaybar.
right. It's a significant event.
And during this event, Prophet Muhammad sent his son-in-law, Ali, to collect his kumus. Now, just for context, this was a specific share, 1/5 of the spoils of war set aside for the Prophet and Allah, as laid out in the Quran, Surah Al-Anfal, verse 41.
Okay.
And Ali's instruction was basically to select the very best items from this share.
And what's presented in this account as, well, particularly striking is what happened next. According to the source, Ali chose who's described as the most beautiful slave girl from the captives.
The most beautiful one?
Yes. He then took her to a private area, had intercourse with her, and then performed a ritual bath afterwards.
Okay, and this action, as the account describes it, didn't just happen quietly.
Yeah.
It immediately caused quite a stir among his companions.
Yeah, that's what the source says.
Baraya, who was a notable companion, was apparently quite angered by what Ali did. He took his concerns straight to another prominent figure, Khalid ibn Walid. And the main issues, as this analysis lays them out, were kind of twofold. First, the idea that Ali took a slave girl from the Prophet's designated share.
Right, from the kumus.
And second, maybe even more critically in their view, that he had sex with her without first observing Istibra.
And this brings up that key term, Istibra. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Good question.
The source defines it as a required period of sexual abstinence for a female slave when her ownership changed. So whether she was captured in war or sold. This period was typically one menstrual cycle. And the main purpose, according to this account, was all about paternity, making sure it was absolutely clear who the father was if a child was conceived.
Right, avoiding any confusion about who the father was. So, lineage.
Exactly, lineage.
So Buraida and Khalid, they take these concerns directly to Prophet Muhammad. And the Prophet's response, as reported in the source, is pretty revealing.
What did he say?
Well, he reportedly asked Buraida if he was upset with Ali. Then he stated that Ali deserves more than that from the kumus, and kind of questioned why Buraida disliked him. So the analysis concludes from this that the Prophet essentially approved of Ali's actions. It even adds a note saying the Prophet himself did the same thing to Aisha.
Right. And the analysis we're looking at really emphasizes that the main concern being voiced here by Buraida, by the Prophet, by the others involved in the specific account, it wasn't about, say, the sexual act in relation to a potentially young girl from a modern ethical standpoint. Instead, the focus described is purely on following the correct protocol. The rules around Istibra and making sure the Prophet's share of the booty was handled correctly.
So procedure over the act itself in that specific discussion.
That's how the source presents that specific interaction,
Yes.
yeah. It suggests a very different set of priorities were perhaps in play compared to how we might view it today.
Okay, so if we try and connect this to the bigger picture, the sort of legal interpretations, the source goes deeper into why Istibra, that waiting period, might have been bypassed in this particular case. It brings in commentary from Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in Fath al-Bari. And Ali's explanation, or defense, according to this commentary, was that the slave girl was, quote, virgin and prepubescent.
Okay, virgin and prepubescent.
And therefore, in this specific interpretation presented, she didn't actually require Istibra. And the text adds that this view was apparently consistent with the practice of many Sahaba, many companions, before him.
Right. And the analysis interprets this specific detail pretty directly. It suggests it was seen as, well, common understanding, maybe even practice, among the Prophet's companions, that prepubescent slave girls could be taken without needing that month-long Istibra wait. The source basically argues that this made younger girls perhaps a preferred choice precisely because it allowed bypassing that waiting period.
And just to clarify, when the source uses prepubescent here, what age range are we generally talking about?
Typically, in these kinds of historical legal contexts discussed by the source, prepubescent refers to girls who hadn't yet reached menarche, so they hadn't started menstruating.
Right, which directly ties back to how the Istibra rules, the waiting period rules, were applied.
Exactly. Menstruation was the key factor for the standard 1-month Istibra.
Okay, this really leads us into the legal frameworks that the source cites. There's mention of the Risala.
Yes, the Risala. It's a very well-known foundational text in Maliki fiqh. That's a major school of Islamic law, particularly historically influential in North Africa, West Africa, parts of the Middle East.
Okay, and what does it say?
Well, according to the analysis, it seems to support this interpretation. It's quoted as stating that a virgin woman, including virgin minor girls, don't need any waiting period and can be raped immediately. That's the direct quote presented in the source.
Wow, that's quite explicit.
It is. And to clarify the Istibra rules a bit more as the source lays them out, while the standard for an adult slave girl changing owners was 1 menstrual cycle, the rules were different for children who were sold. For them, it was apparently a 3-month period. Similar, actually, to the rule for a woman who no longer menstruated.
3 months for a child sold. Okay.
But here's the crucial part highlighted in the text. There is no Istibra, no waiting period at all for a woman or girl who had never had intercourse.
Right, so recapping that, Istibra is the waiting period, but it varied. Adult women, 1 cycle. Children sold, 3 months. The virgins.
No period required, according to this Maliki interpretation cited, which the source argues effectively made young virgins immediately available under this legal framework.
These details from Maliki fiqh really underscore the specific legal distinctions being made, specifically regarding minors and their sexual availability within these historical systems as described.
Precisely.
So what does this whole legal picture mean for the very, very youngest? Those, infants, toddlers. It raises a really difficult, essential question. How young could a girl actually be sold in the slave market, according to Sharia law, as this source interprets it?
Well, the analysis draws from Imam Abdullah ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani's Maliki fiqh book, and it reveals what the source describes as a truly disturbing historical practice. It states that a slave mother and her baby could be legally separated and sold once the baby got her first 2 teeth.
First 2 teeth. How old is that typically?
That usually happens somewhere between 6 months and a year old.
6 months?
Yes. The implication presented is stark. Mothers could be forced to watch their infants, maybe only 6 months old, literally torn from their arms and sold off to different owners.
That's hard to even imagine. Is there any rationale given for why then?
The source doesn't explicitly state the rationale from the original text, but it implies it might relate to the child reaching a minimal stage of independence, perhaps weaning, being seen as a sort of separate economic unit, however horrifying that sounds to us.
And it wasn't only babies being separated, right? There also talks about slave mothers.
Correct. These were women who had actually borne children to their owners, even they weren't necessarily safe from sale or separation, according to the source. It references Sunan Ibn Majah, number 2517, and quotes Jabir bin Abdullah saying, "We used to sell our slave women, with whom we had intercourse, and the slave mothers of our children, Ummahat al-Adina, when the Prophet was still living among us, and we did not see anything wrong with that."
We did not see anything wrong with
That's the quote provided. The analysis frames this not as an exception, but as a common practice in Islam during the time of Prophet Muhammad, suggesting it was a normalized part of that society.
So these women, even after having children with their owners, could just be sold off.
Yeah, that's what the source indicates. After being, as it puts it, used for a period of time, they were sold, and these mothers were then separated from their children. The analysis emphasizes this wasn't seen as unusual, but rather an accepted, permissible part of the societal structure being described.
Permissible under the legal interpretations they were operating under.
Yes. It profoundly challenges, obviously, modern ideas about family, bonding, children's rights.
Absolutely. Now, to really try and grasp the human cost, the actual lived experience behind these rules and practices, our material includes something else, a really poignant account.
Yes, it shifts perspective.
It's from a contemporary Christian Byzantine witness, writing during the Muslim conquest of the Levant, which was roughly 634 to 641 CE. So this isn't about legal texts anymore. It's about witnessing the impact.
Exactly. It provides a different, very human viewpoint from that specific time in conflict. This Byzantine witness expressed just deep sorrow, deep lament over the destruction of Christian families during the conquest.
What do they describe?
The account, as presented, is harrowing. It says, they take the wife away from her husband and slay him like a sheep. They throw the babe from her mother and drive her into slavery.
Oh my goodness.
The child calls out from the ground and the mother hears, yeah, what is she to do? It paints this picture of utter helplessness and brutality.
That's just a devastating imagery. Does it go on?
It does. It continues with really disturbing clarity. And so it is trampled under the feet of the horses, camels, and infantry.
Trampled.
Yes. The witness describes children being torn from their mothers like the soul from within the body, mothers forced to watch as they divide her loved ones from off her lap. 2 of them go to 2 owners, herself to another.
Separated right there.
Right there. And then this image, the mother with milk pouring forth from her breast, left only to cry out, "Go in peace, my darlings, and may God accompany you."
That specific detail, the milk pouring from her breast as her baby is taken, it's just incredibly visceral and deeply unsettling. It really forced you to confront the profound human suffering behind these, drier legal descriptions or historical accounts.
Absolutely. This account, as the source presents it, powerfully illustrates the immense emotional trauma, the complete shattering of families that were direct results of these practices during that specific historical conflict. It adds that crucial human dimension to the legal and historical points we've been discussing.
Yeah, it highlights the suffering involved.
Definitely.
So we've really taken a deep dive today into some incredibly difficult historical texts. We've carefully examined how they describe the treatment of vulnerable people. We went from that incident involving Ali and the slave girl at Khaybar through the complex rules around Istibra, especially for prepubescent girls, and then landed on the just wrenching reality of infant slavery and family separation described in these sources. The details pulled from Sahih al-Bukhari, the Maliki fiqh texts, and that Byzantine account, they certainly offer a challenging perspective on the historical norms and the moral frameworks that apparently allowed these things.
And the YouTube source that we've primarily been drawing from, it reaches a very strong conclusion based on this material. It argues that these documented practices, especially those involving infants and minors, well, it contends they represent a profound moral failure by certainly modern standards.
Right.
It challenges any claims of divine origin for such practices, characterizing them instead as reflecting cruelty, inhumanity. The source essentially argues that any system allowing infants and minors to be traded, exploited, or violated in these ways cannot be described as divine.
It frames it as fundamentally inhumane.
Yes, using terms like monstrous, satanic, inhumane, degrading, and evil. We presented these strong viewpoints exactly as they appear in the source material, just to make sure we fully convey the arguments being made there.
Understood. And understanding these historical contexts, even the deeply uncomfortable ones like we've discussed today, it's just absolutely crucial, isn't it, for really grasping how societal values and legal systems have evolved over time.
It really is. History isn't always comfortable.
No. So as you, our listener, reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider how different cultures throughout history have defined vulnerability and how they've then either protected or, as these sources strongly suggest in these cases, failed to protect their most vulnerable members. What really stands out to you as you think about this? What do you see as the biggest shift, or maybe perhaps more disturbingly, the greatest continuity in how societies grapple with these really profound moral questions of vulnerability and justice? Something to think about.
Thanks for listening to Pod Trendcast. Stay curious, stay questioning,